Grace is one of the most beautiful words in the language of faith. It carries with a sense of gift, of something unearned yet freely poured into our lives. And when life exposes our weaknesses, our failures, or our burdens, it is in those very places that God's grace becomes most real. There's a verse in the second letter to the Corinthians, chapter 12, verse 9, where the Apostle Paul shares the words he heard from the Lord. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. These words are not an abstract idea, but a living promise. They invite us to see our limitations not as barriers, but as the very places where God's presence enters most deeply. Imagine a weary traveler carrying a heavy pack across a rugged path. Each step feels heavier, and the weight seems impossible to bear. But suddenly, a hand reaches out, lifting the burden, not by removing the path, but by sharing the load. That hand is grace. It does not erase the journey, but transforms the way we walk it. Many of us resist weakness. We want to appear strong, capable, and in control. Yet the truth is that our human strength will always reach its limits. There are moments when no effort, no wisdom, no resource seems enough. In those moments, we are tempted to despair. But here, grace whispers a different truth. You are not alone. My power rests upon you. Paul himself struggled with what he called a thorn in the flesh. Though we are not told exactly what it was, we know it was painful and humbling. He prayed earnestly for God to remove it, but instead of taking away, the Lord answered with grace. Not absence of struggle, but presence of strength. This is a paradox of faith, that God's power does not shine most brightly when we stand tall and strong, but when we kneel low and lean on Him. In weakness, grace becomes visible. In failure, mercy speaks louder. In burden, His love sustains. Perhaps today you feel the weight of your own frailty. Maybe your body is tired, your heart discouraged, or your spirit heavy. Hear again the words spoken long ago. My grace is sufficient for you. These words are for you, here and now. They remind you that grace is not a past event, but a present reality. When we allow grace to meet us in weakness, something shifts within. The burden is not gone, but it is no longer ours to carry alone. The valley remains, but it is filled with light. Our weakness becomes a canvas where God paints His strength. So pause for a moment. Breathe deeply. Imagine the golden light of God's presence wrapping around your weariness. Let His grace whisper into every fragile place of your being. You are held. You are sustained. You are enough because my grace is enough. Grace is not only a truth for great trials, it is also for the daily struggles that quietly weigh on our souls. Life is often not marked by dramatic storms, but by steady drizzles, small frustrations, lingering worries, repeated tasks that seem endless. In these ordinary burdens, too, God's grace is enough. Think about how Jesus taught His disciples to pray. In Matthew 6, verse 11, He said, "Give us today our daily bread." Notice the focus. Not on tomorrow's bread, not on next year's provision, but on today. This simple line reveals a deeper truth, that God's grace is given not in one overwhelming dose for all of life, but in daily portions, fresh and sufficient for the moment at hand. Many of us worry about tomorrow, stacking future anxieties on top of today's cares until the weight becomes unbearable. But grace invites us to live in the present. God does not ask us to carry tomorrow's burdens today. He provides enough strength, enough peace, enough mercy for this day. And tomorrow, His grace will meet us again. Picture the Israelites in the wilderness. Each morning, they found manna on the ground, a daily bread sent from heaven. They were told not to hoard it, for it would spoil if stored. Why? Because God wanted them to trust His daily provision. Manna was more than food. It was grace in edible form, teaching them to rely on His presence one day at a time. Our lives may not involve manna, but the principle is the same. Each day holds its own challenges: work deadlines, family tension, financial pressures, health concerns. Sometimes these struggles feel small compared to great tragedies, yet they wear us down slowly. Grace enters here, quietly, faithfully, reminding us, you are not carrying this alone. Think of the parent who rises early to prepare breakfast for children, rushes to work, returns home to cook, clean, and manage endless tasks. Or the student overwhelmed by assignments and expectations. or the caregiver tending to an elderly loved one, exhausted yet unseen. In each of these places, God's grace arrives, not necessarily to remove the load, but to strengthen the heart carrying it. 2 Corinthians 9 verse 8 assures us, "And God is able to bless you abundantly, so that in all things at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work." This verse is not only about material provision, it is about grace as the resource for every season and circumstance. There is a quiet miracle in realizing that grace is not abstract, but practical. It shows up in patience you did not know you had, in peace that surpasses understanding, in strength to take one more step. It arrives in the encouragement of a friend, the kindness of a stranger, the unexpected calm in a moment of stress. Grace clothes the ordinary with divine presence. When we train our hearts to notice grace in daily struggles, gratitude begins to grow. Instead of focusing only on what is lacking, we start to see the subtle gifts already here. That breath you just took, the sunlight breaking through the window, the meal on your table, all whisper of grace. Even the ability to endure, to keep going one more day, is grace. But grace also invites us to rest. We often think productivity proves our worth, that constant busyness is necessary. Yet grace says otherwise. Grace reminds us that we are loved not because of what we accomplish, but because of who we are in God's eyes. It allows us to pause, to rest, to breathe without guilt. So perhaps today, in the middle of your routine, stop for just a moment, close your eyes and whisper, "Lord, thank you for the grace of today." Let that prayer remind you that His presence is here in this very moment, and that His grace is enough, not just for life's biggest storms, but for the quiet daily struggles you carry. And tomorrow, when new challenges arrive, grace will be there again, fresh, sufficient, unending. Grace is not only God's provision for our weakness or our daily struggles. It is also His transforming power that reshapes who we are. Grace does not leave us where it found us. It lifts us, renews us, and makes us new. Titus 2 verses 11 to 12 tells us, "For the grace of God has appeared that offers salvation to all people." It teaches us to say no to ungodliness and worldly passions, and live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in this present age. Notice how grace is described, not as passive comfort, but as active teaching. Grace is a teacher. It instructs us, shapes us, and molds us into people who reflect God's love. We often think of grace only as pardon, the forgiveness of sins, and it is that, gloriously so. But grace is more. Grace is also power, the ability to live differently, to walk in freedom, to grow into the likeness of Christ. Forgiveness removes the weight of the past, while grace equips us for the path ahead. Think of a person struggling with anger, bitterness, or fear. On their own, they cannot change. But when grace enters, something shifts. The anger softens into patience, the bitterness into forgiveness, the fear into trust. These are not achievements of human effort, but fruits of grace transforming the heart. Paul experienced this personally. In 1 Corinthians 15 verse 10 he wrote, "But by the grace of God I am what I am, and His grace to me was not without effect. No, I worked harder than all of them, yet not I, but the grace of God that was with me." He recognized that every good thing in his life, his calling, his perseverance, his faithfulness, was not the product of his strength, but the effect of grace. Grace transforms not just individuals, but communities. When grace fills a family, forgiveness replaces grudges. When grace fills a church, unity overcomes division. When grace fills society, compassion rises above selfishness. Grace is like a golden light spreading through mist, soft yet powerful, changing everything it touches. Transformation by grace also means freedom from shame. Many carry silent guilt from past mistakes, believing they disqualify themselves from God's love. But grace declares otherwise. Romans 8 verse 1 proclaims, "Therefore, there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus." Grace does not deny our failures. It redeems them. What once brought shame becomes a testimony of God's mercy. And grace never runs out. John 1 verse 16 says, "From His fullness we have all received grace upon grace." Picture wave after wave on the shore, never ceasing, each one new and fresh. That is how God's grace flows into our lives. Unceasing, overflowing, abundant. No weakness, no failure, no season of struggle can exhaust it. But grace also calls us to extend what we have received. Just as God has shown grace to us, we are invited to show grace to others, to forgive when it is hard, to be patient when we are tired, to love when it feels undeserved. In doing so, we become living reflections of the grace that has been poured into us. Imagine what your life could look like if every moment was shaped by grace. Not striving to prove yourself, not crushed by failures, but living in the steady rhythm of gift and renewal. Grace in your weakness, grace in your daily struggles, grace transforming your heart and actions. This is a promise. His grace is enough for you. So as we close this meditation, let these words echo in your soul. You are not defined by your failures. You are not sustained by your own strength. You are not walking alone. You are carried, renewed, and transformed by grace. Take one deep breath and whisper, Lord, thank you that your grace is enough for me. Let it be the prayer that steadies you today, the song that carries you tomorrow, and the truth that transforms your life. And whenever weakness, worry, or shame tries to return, remember his promise. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Yes, beloved, his grace is enough for today, for tomorrow, for all eternity.